What if I told you there is a simple way to improve your photography? Something that the best photographers do almost every day. Many times, many of us feel stuck, like we are not progressing. I've been there. Last year, on a flight back to London, I was bored and I was looking around. When I noticed a man, he was sitting 2 rows ahead of me and he was watching a movie. At first, I ignored him. But then I started paying attention to the framing, the light, the composition. And suddenly, something clicked. I could feel the story. Watching a movie without audio trains your eye to see how visuals alone create meaning. Today, I'll break down 3 powerful lessons that you can take from films. And at the end, I'll share a final act you can use to make your shot even stronger. Sergio Leone is one of the most important directors for the last century, and he was a master of lighting. This scene from Dark Sucker is a perfect example. The car is dimly lit, with warm golden light hitting character's face, and that light is coming to gap, bouncing off metal. The background is almost dark, isolating them. It's almost like a Rembrandt painting. What does this lighting do? It makes the scene feel intimate, like you are in the car with them. So the photography takeaway is to use side light to create drama and let the shadows fall off into the darkness for contrast, and eventually you can bounce warm light to create a cinematic glow effect. Now let's talk about single source lighting, one of the most raw, powerful way to light a scene. And nobody does it better than Fight Club. Here Tyler stands under a single dim light. The light falls hard on his face, casting deep shadows on his eye and the cheekbone. The rest of the room, almost pure darkness. This setup does something brilliant. It makes him feel like a prophet, a leader. It's harsh and gritty and gives him authority over the room. So back to photography. Use a single light to create a moody effect. Second, position this light over your subject to create dramatic shadows. Third, let the background fade into darkness to create isolation. Now let's talk about one of the most famous lighting setups in film history, rim light. And Blade Runner is a masterclass. Look at Roy here. He is soaked in rain, but the strong backlight outlines his face and shoulders. This does 2 things. 1, it separates him from the background, and 2, make him feel almost ethereal, like a ghost. The contrast between the cool blue light and the warm skin tone create emotion. So our photography takeaway are: use rim light to separate your subject, and then shoot in low light with a strong backlit to create drama. And eventually water, haze or mist amplify the effect. For this scene in Good Will Hunting, Gus Van Sant started with a wide shot, placing Will and Chucky on the opposite side of the composition. There is also the car in the middle, so that keep distance between them. And as you can see, the rule of third is the guide for the position of the 2 subjects. At first, the camera alternates evenly between them. Keep the shot balanced. This moment they are talking about everyday life. But as Chucky starts to open up his feelings, something changes. The director zoomed in on Will first, so we focus on his reaction. Then, when Chuck opens up completely, we cut to a tight close-up for him, making his word hit harder. In this moment, Chucky is completely vulnerable. The opening part of the scene most likely use a focal length like 50mm to keep everything in the frame. And as the scene gets emotional, the director switched to a focal length which is most likely 85 or even longer, isolating their face and drawing us into their emotions. Our takeaway for photography: 50mm is neutral, is natural, it's perfect for storytelling, and longer focal lengths like 85-135 create intimacy. Zooming in at the right moment is the way to capture feelings. Let's start again with one of the most poetic scenes from Sergio Leone. In Once Upon a Time in America, there is Deborah dancing in the restaurant. What makes this shot so powerful? It's negative space and framing within a frame. Leone places Deborah in the center, using a wide shot to emphasize the emptiness around her. She feels almost untouchable, like a dream. And also the light is very important in this scene. Then we cut to Noodles, watching through a small opening in the wall, framing her in a tight rectangle. This creates distance. He sees her, but he can't reach her. The wide-angle lens, most likely 28 or 35, keeps both Deborah and the environment in the view, reinforcing her loneliness. When we cut to Noodles instead, Leone compressed the scene, most likely with an 85, making the small aperture in the wall even smaller, as if Noodle is trapped outside Deborah's world. So our photography takeaway. First, use negative space with wide focal length to create isolation. Second, frame the subject within object to create layers. And third, longer focal length compress the space, making distance even bigger. Now, the last scene about composition and focal length, it's about precision in framing, and nobody does it better than Wes Anderson. The Grand Budapest Hotel is full of examples. Take this train scene. The symmetry is flawless. The characters are in the perfect place, surrounded by perfectly aligned details. But here's the genius part. When the conversation gets more serious, the framing shifts off-center, breaking the balance slightly. So Anderson uses a 40mm to keep both characters in the frame and focus on them. Also, the flat composition, there is no background blur, makes the scene feel almost like a painting, and at the same time emphasizing every details. So again, our photography takeaway is that 40mm is a focal length that can create a natural feeling, maybe slightly exaggerated. Keep everything in focus, make the scene feel well organized and composed. And last is that symmetry works better with consistent focal length, like 40mm, which has no distortion, is natural. Okay, let's start again from my favorite director, Sergio Leone, and from the movie Once Upon a Time in America. There is this scene where the kids are walking through the empty street of New York, with the Manhattan Bridge behind them. This is simply one of the most iconic compositions in cinema. Every element of the composition is carefully designed to make the scene feel 3D and give you the emotion of these kids walking in this big city. In the foreground, Leone places us right behind the kids, like we are walking with them. The build on both sides creates a natural tunnel, leading our eyes towards the massive Manhattan Bridge. If we move to the midground, you can see how the kids feel small compared to the massive city. Leone uses composition to tell us everything we need to know. This is a story about childhood, about dreams overshadowed by the harsh reality of the world they live in. Now, look at the background. The bridge is not just a backdrop, it's a symbol for the kids. It represents an opportunity, but also the weight of the future. It's the bridge that creates the scale, make the kids feel small and vulnerable. Leone's choice of focal length is absolutely perfect. He decided to use a longer focal length to compress the scene and make the kids closer to the bridge. The whole composition is stronger and more cinematic. This shot is pure storytelling. From the details of the foreground, the kids walking, and the looming bridge, every single detail creates meaning. So what are the photography takeaways from this scene? First, using leading line to guide the viewer's eye. Second, frame your subject with element in the foreground to add layer. Position your subject lower in the frame. This is really important to have that feeling of scale. And then eventually to compress the scene with a longer focal length and have that cinematic look. This moment in The Mood for Love is a masterclass of visual storytelling, where depth, layer and framing create intimacy and an emotional weight. The director uses a foreground obstruction, tight space and soft lighting to immerse us in the characters' emotions. The camera frames the characters through a tight alley, using walls and doorway to create the layers. The framing makes us, the audience, feeling like we are peeking into their private world. The director used a longer focal length to compress the space. So our takeaway for photography. So first is to use hallway, walls, object to frame our subject, compress the scene and create layers. Second, create a contrast between cool and warm light to enhance mood and depth. And third, again, shoot with a longer focal length. So far, we have explored how light, composition and layers can improve your photography. But how do we keep learning and refine our eye over time? Here's the final hack. Keep studying the best cinematographer and their techniques. I recommend checking out those 4 YouTube channels that breaks down light, composition and cinematography technique in a way that photographers can apply them too. And that's it. Watching movie without audio changed completely my way of approaching photography, and I hope it does the same for you. Now, I would like to hear from you. Have you ever tried to watch a movie without audio? And what do you think of my movie selection? And please, suggest some of your favorite movies so I can watch them as well. Drop a comment and let's talk. See ya!